Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we're taking a look at a thumb trigger rifle from Iron Horse out of Utah. Now, thumb trigger firearms have been around for 100 or 150 years. They've never been super popular, but they're kind of always out there. Someone will get the idea that, you know, there are advantages to using your thumb to fire the gun instead of your index finger, and we should try designing something around that. Well, Iron Horse is the most recent company to do that, and I think, as far as I can come up with, they're the only people who've ever done it with a self-loading or semi-automatic rifle. The company owner contacted me actually quite a while ago about this and was very excited about it, very proud of what they have come up with, and suggested that I might be interested. And I told him, like, you know, thumb trigger rifles come up, and they inevitably kind of fade away without a lot of commercial success. And I'm not sure you'd be happy with me doing a video on a brand new one that you're producing. Well, he insists, and so we have one of Iron Horse's thumb trigger DMRs here today. They offer this in a number of different configurations. You can get it just as a stripped lower receiver, but then they also have a couple of complete rifles. This being the DMR, it has a relatively heavy barrel. I went ahead and just dropped the scope and the bipod on it, so that it's in actual usable configuration. And let me first show you how it works, and then we'll take it out to the range and see if it does what Iron Horse says it does. To start with, the key ingredient here is the lower receiver. The upper is completely standard, will drop onto any AR lower, as one kind of would expect these days. The stock is completely standard. Of course, obviously the big thing here is there's no trigger. Magazine well, by the way, completely standard, takes all normal magazines. It'll take whatever different calibers of upper you want to put on it. Presumably everything from 9mm up to 50 Beowulf or anything else that you can come up with. As I said, this is made by Iron Horse, multi-caliber, not a whole lot going on there. They do have a pretty cool logo engraved on the side of the magazine well. Except for the trigger, the controls are pretty standard. We have our normal AR bolt release and bolt hold open here. The safety is down here, and it is finger operated. So red is fire, white is safe, and I can flip that back and forth nice and easily. We have a standard magazine release there. The trigger is the weird bit. So that right in there is actually the trigger, and it's operated by your thumb, not your index finger. You wrap all four fingers around the grip, stick your thumb inside there in the back top of the pistol grip, and when I depress the trigger completely, it drops the hammer. So the fire control parts for this are unique to this design. The hammer here has different geometry in order to work with the trigger, and obviously the trigger is non-standard. Iron Horse gives a couple of different explanations for why this would be a good idea. One of them is there are people who have, well, are in the most extreme case missing their index finger or perhaps have an injury to it. And for them, the thumb is an easier way to actuate a trigger. Okay, seems totally valid. They suggest that in cold weather, your finger is going to get stiffer than your thumb, and your thumb will be an easier, better way to fire the gun precisely and with good, retaining good minute muscle control rather than a very cold finger. Can't speak to that one really so much. I live in the desert. They also suggest that your shooting precision will be better because you are less likely to disturb the aim of the rifle with a vertical movement like so of the thumb than a rearward movement, potentially a side-to-side movement with your index finger. That one we will find out about in just a few minutes. I will point out here, the trigger is still protected, so we're used to having a trigger guard around the trigger. Having these two sort of walls on the side of the trigger is, frankly, probably better protection than a trigger guard that we're used to. It's actually not that difficult for something to get inside the trigger guard of a normal firearm and potentially press the trigger, especially if you're laying down in grass or walking through a densely forested area with a bunch of branches sticking out. This is going to be pretty well protected, better than a normal trigger. So, interesting. That's a point in its favor. But I think the real question everyone's going to have is, how does this actually shoot? So, let's find out. So, I have a pair of 10-round magazines here, and we're going to do a couple of groups on paper. I know Henry says you only need 9 rounds, but we're going to do 10. What we're going to do here is one group of 10 rounds on paper with Iron Horse's upper and their thumb trigger lower. Then I'm going to swap it over onto a KP15, actually a What Would Stoner Do lower, which will be the exact same upper, the same scope, the same zero, the same barrel, the same ammo, everything the same except with a really nice KE traditional trigger. And we'll see which group is actually any better. One thing I do want to point out here that's a little bit funky. Obviously there's the funky thing of where's my trigger? Oh, right, it's on the back on the inside. The other is that you actually have to have a relatively low grip on the pistol grip because your trigger is up here. And so, you know, we get used to, especially with handguns, trying to get as high grip as possible, and even on carbines as well. And you have to fight that urge because you have to bring your grip down here to be able to use the thumb trigger. So a little bit of a different proposition. This is very much a 2-stage trigger. There's a basic take up, and then you hit a bit of a wall, and then a pretty crisp release. I don't think it's quite as light as my KE trigger, but it's not bad. Might have pulled that one a little to the left. A little bit of dust getting kicked up here out in the desert. They put a brass deflector on this, but it's shorter than a normal brass deflector, and it's not actually deflecting brass. The brass is still coming pretty much back at me and almost down the collar. In fact, we're gonna button up that top button. Nobody needs hot brass down the shirt. That one would have gone down. All right. That's our 10 rounds. No malfunctions, happy to say. These are, in fact, the very first rounds I've put through this rifle, with the exception of about 8 rounds to get it zeroed with this optic. So no complaints for functionality so far. Now we'll transition to the left-hand target and see how we do with our traditional trigger. I don't get too much of a flinch from getting hit in the face with brass. It's getting really annoying to have brass bouncing off my face after every shot. All right, my scope is not good enough to see these hits through the scope. So we'll start here. This is a surprise for me. That is my KE Arms traditional trigger group. That is not too shabby. That is just a hair over 2.25 minute vertical and about 1.5 minute horizontal. Total edge to edge is like 2.25 inches. Now, let's see what the thumb trigger did. Also not bad. We got 1 inch. That is like exactly the same size group statistically. I think
All right, so don't worry about these guys. This was from zeroing. This, with the regular trigger, is a tighter group. Interestingly, I had less windage dispersion than I did on the thumb trigger. And on the one hand, well, you can't even say that this was practice or that the gun heated up, because my larger group was actually the first one. So if anything, I should have had better trigger control, better windage control specifically on the thumb trigger. That's one of the things that Iron Horse talks about, is because your thumb is just going vertical, you don't have this potential side-to-side press on the trigger, which clearly isn't an issue for me on a traditional trigger. And I had a little bit of a larger grouping there with the thumb trigger. I will say it actually was a very comfortable gun to shoot with the thumb trigger. That took me a little bit by surprise. I had pretty low expectations here. I didn't think there was going to be really any benefit, and I kind of, I expected this result. Honestly, I'm very happy with this. I thought the thumb trigger would actually be more of a problem for me, in particular because it's a brand new concept and I've got a total of like 18 rounds through the system so far. So perhaps with some practice you could get better with it. Do I think there is a fundamental benefit to the thumb trigger concept? In terms of precision shooting, I really don't think there is. In terms of disability or handicap, potentially, absolutely. That's, like I said, not something that I can really speak to personally. I do not see a thumb trigger taking over as a major concept. I think it will remain a very niche sort of thing for people who want something different or who have a very specific physiological need for it. Thumb triggers have been around for 150 years. I actually have an example of one on the channel. We'll probably be doing another one at some point coming up before too long. But they've been tried. They've never managed to take off as a commonplace thing. And I think we see a good example of why that is. I don't think they offer a specific marksmanship benefit. So other than that, and the rifle performed pretty well. That's about as well as I can shoot anything. So props to Iron Horse on that. The upper is good. And the lower certainly works just fine if it's the sort of thing that you're looking for, that you think is appropriate to your specific needs. For everyone else though, there's a plethora of really good traditional triggers out there that can give you results that I think are every bit as good. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.